You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Your hosts are Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Our guest today is James Brown. Now, James is one of the leading magicians in the UK, achieving the prestigious title of Close-Up Magician of the Year by the world-famous Magic Circle. So normally I keep these episodes down to about an hour. Sometimes they can be a little bit longer than an hour. But this conversation was so interesting and so organically compelling that I couldn't cut it down to an hour. So this episode's about 2 hours long. It's basically a double episode. And if you like, you can think of the first half as being the normal episode and the second half as being just like an extended bonus. In this first half, James talks about his self-applied title of Professional Opportunist. He talks about creating joy in other human beings, this interesting thing he's got called urban chaos. And he also talks a lot about confidence, which is really interesting and might be surprising to some people, but it's very eye-opening. And then the second half, which is the bonus section, is basically an extended meditation by all three of them about political correctness and this sort of curse of ultra-sensitivity that seems to be plaguing our society at the moment. And so the second half is basically just completely unedited. I just let it roll. So here we go with James Brown.
I met James a few years ago. He came to the U.S., and this is James Brown, not the famous singer, of course, but the famous magician and mentalist and pickpocket and hypnotist and teacher, James Brown from the UK. James came over and he taught a combination hypnosis, magic, pickpocketing course in Las Vegas, Nevada, which was mind-blowing and fun. And, he kept us entertained the whole time, stealing our watches and wallets and ties and belts and so forth. And James, I had a really good time at that workshop.
No, thank you, mate.
Yeah.
It feels like a lifetime ago.
It was. A lot of things have happened since then, for sure, in my life and others. But James is known for a lot of things in the world. He not only goes around the world teaching about hypnosis and magic and performance. You've done like a TED Talk or two, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. One in particular I saw wasn't it called The Power of Belief or something like that?
The Magic of Belief. Magic.
Which was great. If you have a chance, listeners, to do a search for those things. We'll try to provide some links for that later on the page, but, look for The Magic of Belief, TED Talk, James Brown. Also look up the term professional opportunist, which, because, that's a good way to find him. Make sure you have the right one. Could you tell us a little bit about that fancy title you have, the Professional Opportunist?
Yeah. Okay. So it stems from a couple of things, to be honest. The first one was here in the UK, and it may be different worldwide, of course, but here in the UK, the word magician it comes with a bit of baggage. Sometimes, not all the time, but it can often come with a bit of baggage that when you say magician, people tend to think of either, Uncle Bob who does those 3 card tricks at Christmas, just something a little bit lame, or people can often think of a Saturday afternoon balloon modeler at the children's restaurant events. And neither of those things, well, at least I hope neither of those things sort of defined what I did in any way and what I do. So part of it was I was searching for something to distinguish myself from that category. Also because I was doing a lot of teaching and training, people weren't really going to pay a lot of money for a magician. Again, we're talking about within the environment that I worked in. So I was looking for something a bit different. the term professional opportunist came about for several people that I know. Specifically, the guy who sort of coined the phrase for me was a guy called Darius Zaitabari, who described what I did as being very opportunistic. He said, of all the people I know, you just have this kind of sort of carefree attitude, and he was trying to define what it was, and essentially what it came down to was that I don't, unlike most people who are goal orientated, in the moment that they have, like, this is the thing I want to achieve, and they're sort of blinkered to that end, which is not a bad thing necessarily. I have a much more sort of free-spirited way of looking at things, and I'm always looking out for ways to move. So the journey is more interesting than the outcome, as far as I'm concerned. And as a result of that, I'm happy to change direction at a moment's notice. I'm not very happy with scripting and scripts, generally speaking. So this idea of the professional opportunist was born, that, I'm happy to mix together magic and pickpocketing and suggestion and mentalism and sort of throw them all into the toolkit and pick whatever I need out at any given moment in time. And so that was kind of the potted history of the name.
Okay. And it sort of reminds me of something a little older, like Victorian almost sounding,
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if I'm honest, it slightly comes off the back of a number of other performers who, again through time, who've sort of decided let's have a title. And it's very much a subtitle, in the sense of, it's James Brown, Professional Opportunist. It's that kind of tagline to define who I am. And and as you've kind of proven, it leads into conversation. People, written on a business card. The first set of business cards I had literally just said, on one side it just said James Brown, Professional Opportunist, and on the other side it just had my mobile phone number. So people would like, what's this? Explain.
Open loop. Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah.
Very much.
It's a real purple cow. That purple cow idea that it's a tagline that stands out, and you go, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
I have to say that when you perform, and even when you were performing for us in a small group, it's really hard not to laugh, like to laugh your ass off, because as you're doing all this stuff and you're, in a sense, getting molested and taken advantage of by your technique, it's hard not to just start giggling, because you just can't believe that there's so many things going on and that you're missing so much. And I don't know. I mean, do you find that a lot of people laugh when you're doing what they're doing?
Yeah, well, I don't want to take myself seriously. My whole purpose of getting into this industry from the beginning was, and it's still sort of my raison d'etre to this day, it's the idea of creating joy in other people. That to me is why I do this. I mean, the idea that money is a reward, not a reason. So money is the thing that happens because of the thing that you do, and the thing that I do is about creating joy. And I found, for me, the best way is to not take myself seriously. I want people to have fun. I don't want to be that kind of Dark Lord style magician, mentalist.
Mephistopheles.
Yeah, it's sort of a much more of a sort of a playful Loki-esque character. That to me was what I've always aimed for. I've never considered myself to be a comedian specifically, but comedy, good times and laughter are massively important in everything that I do, and it kind of doesn't matter, even when I'm delving into maybe even the sort of the therapeutic side of life. I think it's important that we should have playfulness, I think, is a good word. Playfulness. There's a lack of playfulness in too many areas of life. And part of my feeling and thinking is I'd like to bring playfulness back.
Yeah.
I think human beings are arguably born at their best and then deteriorate over time unless something is done better.
Yeah.
That's well put. What's interesting is children have to play in order to develop as human beings, and we gather all of our adult skills from childhood play. And at what age do we stop playing? It's like, maybe is it when we graduate from high school and realize that it's okay, that's it, it's time to grow up. I wonder where that happens officially, and why do we have to do that?
For some of us, the truth is it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's been my great joy. I came up with something many years ago, and I don't know if we did it I can't recall whether we actually did it in.
I think we did. If I'm
urban chaos.
If I'm mind reading what you're about to say, I was just going to say it. In fact, the exercise where we had to go out and create unusual things, do unexpected things.
Yeah, well, So I came up with this notion of what we called urban chaos. It was just the title it got given over time.
I like it.
So the premise of urban chaos, and I would implore your watchers, your listeners, to get involved in this. So the premise is it's layered. Number one, everything that you do is about creating joy for other people. That's the main reason that you're doing it. But within that, you also learn about what social conventions can be and even should be broken. And you learn how much more you are actually capable of doing. So you can go, right. So the very basic level, I would say, of urban chaos is things like free hugs, is understanding that if you ask somebody, if you went out with some friends and you said to most of them, could you walk over to that group of people and offer to hug a stranger? An awful lot of people would say no.
Yeah, that's true.
And you say, why? And then they falter. They kind of don't really know why. Or if they do answer the question, it will be an automated answer. I'm too scared to, or people would laugh at me, or it's just not the thing to do. But none of those are really answers. They don't actually get to the heart of what the problem is. The part of urban chaos was actually to teach people that you can do far more than you think that you can do. And a lot of the stuff that you think you can't do is imaginary. And it's incredibly liberating. You're standing in line in the grocery store waiting to get to the checkout. And there's usually music playing in the thing. But dance with the person in front of you or the person behind you. Mm-hmm. Get people to join in. Play tag in the supermarket. Just randomly walk up to somebody and go, "You're it," and run away. Now, they probably won't chase you. They probably won't chase you. But now and again, somebody will be on the same wavelength, and you just get this thing that happens.
That's a great idea.
And we came up with. I've come up with just tons and tons of these, and some of them are utterly ridiculous. Some of them are classics. So there's things like the peg it forward, where you write a nice little note on a clothes peg, and you clip it to people's things. So you've got things like that, which are kind of fun to do, just out and about, just as something that you can do. But then you've got kind of more challenge aspects, which is what you've seen on Impractical Jokers, where you have to sort of get as many. I think on Impractical Jokers, it was putting pencils into people's pockets. So you bought loads of cheap pencils,
right,
and you just, like, you and a mate would just see how many you could get into one person's pocket before they noticed. And you just have this kind of weird competition. And because you're giving something to somebody, nobody can get cross with you, not really. Yeah. Or pegging balloons. But we used to do it with people, because in the UK, because of the weather, a lot of the young lads wear hoodies. So there's a lot of these hoodie wearers, and they have these hoodies on, but they usually have them down. So the idea was, how many random items could you put into the hood of somebody's coat before they noticed?
And no one turned around and slugged you.
No, never. Well, because again, this is the thing. So there's this assumption of what we fear of the reaction that we might get. Yeah. But bearing in mind that you're doing something straight away you're doing something which is so left field of people's thinking. They don't have a programmed response for it. But also part of it is about how you respond and react, and the expression you have on your face when they do turn around, and the way you handle the situation. These are all, and of course you'd progress up to kind of more interactive things. But simple things which are just silly, like just unadulterated silliness. Like, have you guys got kids, by the way?
I don't. And
no, just pets.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. You got pets. Yeah. But you'll still, you'll still be aware of this concept that because you were children yourselves once. Parents, when you're particularly at a restaurant in a public place, parents will just randomly say to the children, "Do you need to go to the toilet?" And the children will go, "No," and they'll go, "Yes, you do," and they'll kind of frog march you off to the loo.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got kids, so I was aware because I'd said it to my kids. My parents had said it to me. And one day, and this is about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I sat in a restaurant with my wife and I had 2 kids at the time. As in, at the time, our eldest has grown up and left home, you see. But we were sat there in the restaurant with his 2 kids. And Jo, my wife, said to our youngest, Charlie, who was sort of 3 years old at the time, she said, "Charlie, do you need the toilet?" "No." "Yes, you do. Come on." And so she took him to the loo. And then just something struck me as funny. This idea of the things, because you mentioned it earlier, Satch, this idea of the things that we do as children but stop doing as adults. So I thought, wouldn't that be great? So anyway, she came back and we carried on eating. And then I got up and I went, "I'm just going to the loo." And she went, "Okay." And then I walked to the table next to ours, who were just in the middle of their meal, having a nice time. And I leant in, I went, "Sorry, guys, sorry to disturb you, but I'm just going to the toilet. Does anybody else need to go?"
That's beautiful.
People just looked at me blankly. Sort of, "No." And I went, "That's fine." And then I walked to the next table and I said it again. Yeah. Okay. And on the second table, this sort of slightly elderly lady just looked up and went, "Yes." I went, "Come on then," and took her arm and led her to the lavatory.
Oh, that's classic.
But I do this lots of times. My personal favourite, probably my favourite, because it's just so simple, is that social convention that we have when you say maybe you're in a bar. Restaurants different, but bars particularly, you do this a lot, where a group of you will get to the bar and maybe there's 7 of you, but there's only 6 chairs around the table that you're at. So one of you will wander off, find a group who seem to have a spare chair, and you'll say, "Is anybody sitting here?" They'll say, "Oh, no, go for it," and you take the chair and you go back with your friends. I think that's pretty much a universal moment.
Right.
So it's obvious, isn't it? You walk up to a group of people with 1 spare chair and you're saying, "Sorry, is anybody sitting here?" And when they go, "No," you sit down.
Yeah, perfect.
Just join them. Because it's just one of those moments. They don't know, they're not expecting you to do that. But genuinely, I've made friends doing that. I've enjoyed an evening out with people I never knew just because I walked up and said that, sat down, had that. It's a moment of discomfort which can then just be broken with a funny comment or a grin, just as something as simple as a big grin.
Wow.
Kind of a recognition that we all know what's going on. So I mean, it's just about playing with these ideas, but it's really healthy, I think, to do it, because I think as we become, going back to this idea of being childlike and playful, when you're a child, you're not constrained by rules and boundaries because you don't know what they are. So you don't feel constrained, and then those rules are then applied to you, and some of them are there for good reason, an awful lot of them aren't. Mm-hmm. A lot of rules that we have in our lives
go unquestioned.
I mean, sorry to rabbit on about this, but my favourite one of those, and it was kind of what I coined the phrase on, and I've used it in a few talks, is what I call the elbows on the table problem.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So just going back a year or two now, we're having dinner one evening, and I said to Charlie, my youngest, who's 8 now, so he was maybe 6 or 7 at the time, and I said, "Charlie, get your elbows off the table." And I don't know why, but I said it quite sternly, and I'm not usually stern with Charlie, and usually much softer with him. And but I kind of barked at him, saying, "Get your elbows off the table." And he looked really shocked and really hurt. And he said, "Why?" And I went, "Well, it's rude." I said, "But why is it rude?" Like I see the tears welling up in his eyes, bless him. And I thought, I don't know. I really don't have a good answer for that at all. And now I kind of felt bad that I told him off for some, for this bizarre thing. And the only thing I could think was, well, my parents told me. So I phoned my dad up, and I said, I had the same conversation with my father. I said, look, what's going on here? And we went through the same thing. He said, oh, it's rude. Well, why is it rude? And then he thought for a while, and he said, do you know what? He says, I've no idea. He says, I think it's probably because my mum told me. And the question then is, how many generations does that go back with nobody knowing why? Each generation tells the next generation off for having their elbows on the table, but not just saying it as something to do and who cares one way or the other, but actively telling their children off. Actively verbally punishing their children for doing something, but not even knowing why they're doing it. So that I find fascinating.
I was going to say, talk about pegging it forward. It's like that's generation after generation of pegging something negative forward. I remember having the same thought as a child. Somebody told me no elbows on the table. I remember being really, truly puzzled. Like, how is this a problem? Like, I don't understand. It's comfortable.
It kind of, it's it's the right height.
It's perfect. There. I know. Yeah, right. I mean, I think we need to start an anti-movement. Okay, does everybody have their elbows on the table? Okay, good. We can proceed.
Let's begin. Let's begin.
It's a new. Studies show that resting your elbows on the table takes tension out of your shoulders, and it makes a more peaceful meal. So
just imagine creating. Yes, exactly. I was just thinking that.
We just go to random tables and just say, my job is to teach everybody about the latest research, which is bullshit. But and then just get it going, and then we just because the original elbows off the table is bullshit. So why not?
Yeah. Well, you're reminding me of a story that my old girlfriend told me about how her mother would always chop it was like a leg of lamb or a pork roast in half. And that was just part of the process. And so she did it also. And at some point she asked her, Mom, why are we doing that? Why do we always do that? Does it help it cook faster? Or, what's the deal? Why is that always a part of it? And she's like, I don't know. That's how I learned from my mom. And well, luckily the grandmother was still alive. And the grandmother said, well, I just had a small, baking dish. So I had to cut it to fit, into the baking dish. So it's like, so they kind of like put it, face palm, like, oh my God, we didn't have to do this all the years.
That reminds me of something. Now, I don't know how authentic this tale is, but it's good enough. So I'm going to share it.
It better be authentic. Well, just the name of the show.
I know. I'm just going to call it
Feel
authentic.
the pressure, Satch.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, they say that like if you hold your hand like this, and people in listening land won't be able to see what I'm doing. I'm just holding my hand up the way that a pope would generally hold their hand up and like mark somebody, draw a cross. Is that this hand shape got started because a particular pope had an ulnar nerve injury. And this is an ulnar nerve palsy. This is an ulnar nerve, injury, deformity of the hand. And everybody thought there was some magic, significance to this shape he was making with his hand, like that makes the blessing work better or something. And so then many, many people use the same hand thing, not realizing that it was just they're copying an injury.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah. I mean, let's face it. You've just explained about 80% of hypnosis.
Yes,
there we go. And I didn't even know it.
We should call it the Bill Nye effect.
The Bill Nye effect,
right? Because Bill Nye has the claw hands.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah, okay.
Love it.
I love Bill Nye, by the way.
Oh yeah, me too. Well, hey, James, a while back, Carlos had turned me on to your talk about confidence. And Carlos, I'm sure you wanted to talk about this.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Look, can we talk about that now? I watched your talk, and it really changed something in me. I'm so glad I got a chance to incorporate it into my life, and I've been sharing it with students. And would you mind explaining your philosophy about confidence?
Okay. No.
Okay. All right. We'll just close it.
Get off the show.
Okay. Yeah. That'll do. All right. Well, it's probably evolved slightly in some respects as well over time, and there was a degree of, I suppose you might refer to it as modelling. Simply, I just kind of looked around and I asked questions and I paid attention and I tested stuff. But I found that most of the concepts of confidence that I saw fed into the idea of confidence being something that you had to attain, that was something that was out there. It was almost given the definite article, and if you think about it, the language we tend to use around confidence is similar. So we say things like, I need more confidence, I have to get more confidence, I lack confidence, or I lost my confidence. And it always places confidence as this thing. We also see confidence as something that comes via practice. So we have this idea of the mastery, the 10,000 hours mastery model that we associate with confidence as well, that if I do the job long enough, if I get good enough at it, then I will become confident as a result, which leads to this immaculate conception idea that I hope that one morning I will wake up and it's happened. Yeah. Oh my goodness, isn't this incredible?
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eureka.
And yeah, the eureka moment with it. And the truth is that I just didn't see any evidence for this at all. And when it appeared to happen that way, I felt that maybe there was something else going on, and that wasn't really, there was a false positive conclusion being found. So I played around with the idea and I looked at it and I modelled people who are confident. I thought about my own confidence in things, and the other one, of course, is the selective confidence, that we're confident in one thing but not in another. It's conditional to an event or experience. So I started looking at confidence and trying to work out what the common denominators were. What were the things that were the same for everybody? What was making it work? And the basic conclusion I came to was that confidence, in its essence, is the absence of tension in the mind or the body. Yeah, so it's the absence of tension as opposed to relaxation. I think there's a mistake there, and maybe the old way I would have articulated that would be wrong, because I think I used to say relaxation of the mind and the body, and I don't agree with that. I think it's more important that we look at it as the absence of tension in the mind and the body. I believe, and I think that the evidence we have supports this too, but I believe that therefore we're born confident, because we're as children, as toddlers, as babies, toddlers, and young children, we don't have physical tension, nor do we have mental tension, i.e. the negative thought process that creates the anxiety that we feel a lot of the time. And when you look at a child, say you look at a toddler who's learning to walk, the only muscles that child requires to walk, to be able to walk, are the only muscles in its body that are under tension at that point. They're not physically stressed in any other way, shape or form. And you can tell just by looking at the child's face. There's no mental tension going on. There's no anxiety or worry, and it doesn't matter whether they make it to their feet or they fall down or not. They don't They don't have that sense, that tension. And the only occasion when it does happen is more because they are mirroring the behavior of the adult around them. But that's a separate discussion altogether, really. So for me, understanding confidence as a foundational building block to build upon, rather than something that we see that comes at the end of a process, that we actually nurture it to build from. This is the platform we begin from. To me, made so much more sense. And you can think of that in Pavlovian terms as well, the idea of stimulated response, that if I work to condition my thinking physically and mentally, my behavior and my thinking, confidently, i.e. a lack of tension, then I can program myself to behave the right way under the circumstances. So you take something, the classic one, I suppose, would be things like public speaking.
Yeah.
So somebody will be told by their boss at work, in 2 weeks' time, you need to give a presentation to clients or the board, and in that moment, then the anxiety and the tension begins, physically and mentally, and they are in a really Pavlovian sense, they are stimulating themselves to react badly to this environment, and it's sewn into the preparation. And at each level of the preparation, they're reinforcing and reminding themselves that they lack confidence and they have all this tension and and then they wonder why they stand up on stage and everything goes to jelly. And maybe the thing that resolves that sometimes is they get a nice spike of adrenaline, which kind of helps them ride some of it to some degree. But none of that's really, really helpful. You're better off at the beginning when your boss says, you've got this presentation, and you go, oh no, to go, hang on a minute. Let's just have a moment. Let's just physically relax myself. This is the start point. Okay, now we can continue. And every time I feel that sense of tension, I stop, I step back, just let it go, and then I move on again. And like everything else that we do, it does not take long for our bodies to go, okay, I've got that now. I can do that without you, as it were. Yeah, unconsciously competent, if you like that term. Not sure that I do, but that's it's a healthy way of doing it. So a lot of the confidence stuff was simply down to understanding that I think there's a deeper level to it that I'm now interested in, which is the idea of understanding, because obviously now we're adults. So we started off in this naturally confident state, but then the world, parents, school, whatever else influenced us with lots of other experiences. And some of those experiences we dealt with in a very judgmental fashion, judgmental on ourselves and on other people. And we created survival-based responses to things. And really sadly for human beings, a big one is the not worthy of love belief. The I'm not worthy. And you can have the most adoring, loving, wonderful family in the world and still grow up with a base belief of I'm not worthy in some way. And then because of cognitive bias, of course, that now filters every experience that you have through this belief system.
Start to get confirmation bias.
Sorry?
Start to have confirmation bias where you start to look for the thing that you are afraid.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And you also begin to project on those around you. You judge yourself, and in turn you then judge others based on this false belief. And it's a lie. It was always a lie. That's the point. It was always a lie from the very start. There's more graphic and obvious ones that you could look at, like the child that grew up with alcoholic parents, and the parents, because they were alcoholic, didn't show the child love, unconditional love, and that's the key there, of course, unconditional love. It came with condition. So the child isn't able to understand it's the parent's fault. It's not my responsibility. I've got shit parents. So the child can't do that because the child is inherently selfish. Of course it is. It can't be anything other. Its tiny mind is locked away, and this is all it knows. So the child has really little other choice but to assume it's me. And that will start as a feeling, of course, way before it's articulated into language as the child grows older. But then it does. And now everything is filtered through that. So for some people, in fact, for everybody, digging down to understand the big lie, the big thing, and learning to disassociate, to separate out the idea is important, I think. To get to the ability of reducing the mental tension. So I'm kind of interested in that side of things as well. But I don't know if that even did that answer the original question. Did we get there?
I think so. Yeah. I thanks for sharing that. You're right. I think it has evolved a little bit, from even just watching your talk. I love the idea of confidence as a development process, because, there's so many things that we develop. We develop motor skills. We develop personality. There's, scientists study the development of personality, the development of walking, the development of eating skills. There's all these things that we have to develop, but we don't really talk about the development of confidence as a skill, and it sounds like you're kind of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the it's a bit like this, assuming all things being equal. A human is born with two legs, and you then learn to develop the muscles to use those two legs in the process of walking. A human is born with confidence, but you still need to learn to develop to use those muscles
right
effectively as you grow.
Perfect.
And the basis of it is that absence of tension in the mind and the body, and you as a human being work at your best in that environment. I mean, absolutely at your best. One of my favorite demonstrations to this, which I ripped off from the world of Aikido, that's something I used to do many years ago, is I do a demonstration where I get the biggest people in the room, two of the biggest folks in the room, and I get each to come each side, and with both their hands grab hold of my forearms. But I'm not a fit man. I've not, the body is a temple. It's a disused temple at best. Satanists, no. But I get two guys to come up, or two girls, whatever, just two big people to come and grab hold of me, two strong folks to grab hold of me. And the instruction is, I want you to put all of your effort into restraining me. Don't try and stretch me, but just restrain me. And I will put generally all of my effort to try and fight away from you, which I do very badly. And it's tiring. I don't get very far. It was just an exhausting and horrible process. And I'm doing what everybody would do in that situation. I am trying my best. I'm really going for it. And then we stop and just get our breath back for a moment. And then I say, right, do the same thing again. Hold on as tight as you can. Now, this time I do something different. And that is I relax completely. And I just move. And when I say I just move, I mean I just move. So think about this. You just reached out to touch whatever it was. Your arm shot out to your left, and you moved something, or you touched the cat, or whatever it was that you just did.
Touched my other kitty. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just did it again. Yeah. Right. Now, you had to activate muscles in your arm working against each other to do that thing. But you didn't have to think about those muscles activity at all, did you? You didn't have to put any effort into those muscles to get those to get your arm to move.
Easy.
Not at all.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah,
easy.
Yeah. because your body, your brain, your mind knows how to do that without any awareness taking place. Yeah, without any sense of awareness taking place. It knows how to do it. Now, if you put your awareness into it wrongly, it goes wrong. So there's a good way to define this, and it's a very easy thing to do to explain this. If you say to somebody, "Hold your arm up, tense the muscles in your forearm, your bicep, tricep, the whole lot," and with your arm tensed and without letting go of that tension, try and straighten your arm. And the answer is you can't, because your own muscles prohibit your arm from moving.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Because if you don't relax one set of muscles, your arm can't straighten.
Yeah.
If you don't relax the other set, your arm can't bend. So if they're all tensed, your arm ain't going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it's just not possible.
It's I think what you're describing kind of reminds me of sort of the Taoist idea that everything's perfect and then humans add something to it. And then when we add something to it, we kind of mess it up a little bit. And so like you said, we're born confident and then we add something to it. Like in this case, tension. And
yes, absolutely,
it gets in the way.
Or belief that you've got to be competent before being confident.
Yeah,
exactly. Right. Yeah, right. And actually, I would argue that they come exactly the other way around. Yeah. Competence comes from confidence, not confidence from competence. And what you actually find when you do this demonstration, now, if you've not tried this yourselves, I genuinely would and you just get one other person to do it. It's astonishing. And it takes a bit of practice because your brain, your adult, conscious brain, if you like, is saying to you, but I've got to tense my arm, surely, because I'm lifting something heavy or I'm fighting against pressure. Yeah. But actually you don't. If you keep it relaxed and move, your body will activate the right muscles to do what it needs to do, even against the tension of somebody else. Yeah. And I go from being unable to move to being able to quite literally throw two big people around like rag dolls.
Yeah.
And I've done it so many times. And it shows you, I think it's the best demonstration to show you that your body works physically at its best when it is when it lacks tension, not when it's relaxed, but when it lacks tension. And if you speak to, so I spoke to, because I got friends in the army, so I spoke to in the Royal Forces. So I spoke to a friend of mine who is an RAF pilot, and in a conversation with him, I said, "What is the most important thing when you're flying the fighter jets?" And he said. Well, obviously we had a lengthy conversation to get there, but very quickly he said, I can't be tense. He says, I cannot be tense. He says, the moment that my body tenses up, I lose the ability to fly. Because he said, you think about, we're flying at like Mach 1 point something or whatever it happens to be, at astonishing speeds in these things that if you so much as flick it, the plane flips.
Yeah.
He says, so the control is very light. It's very controlled, but it's very light. I've spoken to Formula One drivers who've said the same thing. They're holding on tight because they have to, but the muscular tension is not tension, but the grip is here. But everything up here in the shoulders, this has to be really relaxed because they have to have absolute control of the vehicle. And as soon as tension comes in, they lose the ability to move. It restricts them.
Yeah.
So tension restricts movement, period. Now, if it restricts movement of the body, then it's not a big jump to suggest that tension restricts movement of thought.
Right.
Yeah. As in mental tension. Yeah. And then that takes you into that whole sort of category of fears and all the other bits and pieces. But there we go.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That makes a lot of sense because, I mean, the physical tension is coming from centers in the brain and the thoughts are coming from centers. They're coming from the same place, basically, So they're really not that different.
You've got a keen philosophical mind. I've noticed that a lot of even though you joke a lot and you perform a lot and things, but I've noticed just in your Facebook posts and just in conversations that you do a lot of analysis. You think about ideas and concepts behind words, and you question things a lot, as if you're thinking a lot about the models that are driving the expression.
Yeah, I think, well, it winds my wife up something rotten, actually. She says, it really does. She says, oh, for goodness sake, she says, you question things so much, don't you? It stems from I've spent 20-something years studying deception, at one level or another. And it's hard not to question. So, you've got classic phrases that we have, like seeing is believing. No, it isn't. I mean, it's a slightly arbitrary figure, but there's a very solid scientific case that 80%, give or take, of what you see is entirely hallucinated by your brain. So seeing is not believing at all. It just isn't.
Yeah.
It's a massively filtered process, based around your expectations, beliefs, and biases.
Yeah.
So seeing isn't believing.
Yeah.
And this, and if that's literally the world that you and I are seeing, then we have to raise a lot more questions about a lot more other things as well.
It's a sacred cow or a holy cow. I mean, people don't want you messing with that. It's like their memories. You tell them that their memories are not stored the way we think memories are stored. It's not like some file that you double click and it just opens up and it's everything exactly as it was when you first saw it. It's like, no, you just changed it the moment you searched for it again.
Right.
You've remembered. I mean, think of the word remembering. You're piecing members together, reconstructing, recalling.
Right. It's always an artist's rendition. It's never a picture.
Yes. Yeah. I went to a fascinating lecture 6 months or so ago, maybe a bit longer ago, on memory, and it was specifically false memory syndrome. But the woman was talking about, she was a neuroscientist talking about the whole field of memory and construction, and she said there's just a few things that stuck out because I just I could feel myself grinning like an idiot listening to her talk. But one of the things she said was, a very high percentage of your childhood memories never happened. A very high percentage of, like, pre 5 years old. People who say that they remember what they did at 3 or 4, and like, no, you maybe you can remember what somebody else has told you about what you did at 3 or 4. But the chances of your memory being at any level accurate is slim to none, and probably just none. But then there's other things. I think there was a great. She showed us a video clip of. It was a little car accident. Clearly, the whole thing was staged, obviously, but a little staged car crash. And they'd shown this video to like 1,000 people or something, and half of the people they'd asked the question, estimate the speed of the car when the accident happened, and the other half of the people, they said, estimate the speed of the car when they smashed into each other. Yeah, and the first group said about 30 miles an hour. And the second group said about 50 miles an hour.
Smashed.
And it was the difference between accident and smash.
Wow. Yeah.
And again, I find that incredibly satisfying.
Yeah.
Well, it just tells you how much context is involved with meaning and interpretation.
Yeah. So now you take that into because the part of her point with this was when you are remembering. Part of the action of remembering is that you are actually retelling a story. So when you remember something, even just in your own head, without describing it to somebody else, you are retelling the story. And part of that retelling of the story is language, is words that you're saying to yourself in your head of, oh yeah, I remember doing this and doing it. However you articulate that. But she said, now think about the choice of word that you use in your remembering, which is probably more based on your mood and experience today, it stands to reason that it will have the same level of impact, that you can start to turn details. So there's the same clip that was used. And so I can't remember the exact details. You have to forgive me, but there was a period of time that elapsed as well, and then they asked another set of questions, and the first group were asked, "Was there any blood at the scene?" And the second group were asked, "How much blood was there at the scene?" Yeah, and also words to that effect. So again, that presupposition, and again, sort of seeing that, and there was also something else about the idea of the positive and the negative outcome, and I can't remember the exact. So the idea that glass half empty, glass half full.
Right.
The idea of if an idea was put forward, so they were given a choice of two things. And one of them was spun on a positive, and one of them was spun on a negative, even though they were the same thing.
Right.
And the massive difference in the way that people responded to it.
Well,
so all of this stuff fascinates me.
Yeah, lawyers, I call them liars, but they're good at that particular tool. I mean, they use that in depositions, all the time. I mean, it's a way of framing, each side frames the question in such a way that they can maybe trip up the person being deposed. And, it is a lot about tricks of language and entrapment, and various things can through that, the presuppositions in language. And
which is just one of the many reasons. Yeah, which is just one of the many reasons why I think legalism, legalistic thinking is appalling and just terribly dangerous on multiple levels.
Yeah.
And I find it hilariously funny that human beings have been conned, sold an absolute lie that law brings order.
Right.
Because it doesn't.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that's Tao Te Ching 101 too,
Yeah.
When the Tao is present, people, rejoice and so on. And when the Tao is lost, people lock their doors and, bar up their windows. I mean, it's the same thing. You don't need those layers and layers of rules unless you're going to be creating more and more reasons to.
I've got a friend of mine, John Launchbury, is a mathematician over in Canada, a very famous mathematician, actually. He summed it up, I think, in the most profoundly beautiful way when he's talking about the idea of rules. Yeah, and he says, imagine two dogs, a vicious, mean-spirited dog, and a dog with a gentle spirit. Yeah, law is like a collar around the dog's neck. It does nothing to change the nature of the beast. It simply restrains it. But here's the point: the dog with the gentle spirit doesn't need the collar.
Right.
Yeah.
And the dog with the mean spirit, the collar doesn't do anything to change it.
Boom.
And it only restricts it to a degree, and only to a degree.
Right.
It doesn't actually serve any other purpose.
Right. And the cunning
Billable
dog
hours,
gets
though.
his collar.
Billable hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And now what happens, of course, is that because we have the one size fits all model, you actually end up with because I think the majority of people actually are good in a sense. Yeah, I think that if you were to scale it out, more people are better than they are worse. But because we because of the legal system that we have, which has to play to the lowest common denominator, what you end up with is a lot of good people being under the penalty of law for lots of reasons. Which if you looked at it on a much more sensible individual basis, you wouldn't penalize somebody, just because it's like daft things. Like I was traveling home from a gig. It was 2:00 in the morning. I was wide awake, wired from the show. 2:00 in the morning, driving down the M6, which is a big motorway here in the UK. and it was empty, and I mean empty. It's the what we call it. So it's we have this one toll road in the UK, the M6 toll, and nobody uses it because the Brits don't want to pay. Basically, it saves you like 10 minutes on your journey, and forget it. And certainly at night, there's no point in taking it. But I kind of like it because I like driving down the empty road. So I'm driving down this motorway. The speed limit here is 70, and I was doing 80, 82 maybe. Certainly no more than 80, 82, 83. And a police car pulled out from its little siding. Red and blue lights came on, pulled me over, and I'm thinking, why are you doing this?
Because you interrupted his masturbation session.
Yeah. But it's this idea of, well, hang on a minute. And so my argument is this: laws become more important than the intent for which they were created.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's where we have a problem. That the intent is lost very quickly, and it now just becomes this thing about legalism, that it just becomes about the rule and the regulation, and it contrary to making us better people, which is the illusion that we're given where rules are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
My argument is rules make us worse people. So let me give you a weird example. So say if you work at a company and you schedule a meeting for you and your team for 3:00 in the afternoon, and the memo goes out to everybody, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. So now we have two ways of looking at this. We have the legalistic way, which is 3:00 is a rule. It's 3:00 start. That's a rule, yeah? And therefore to break it has to come with some kind of punishment. Or 3:00 could simply be a practicality. Just literally that, because we need to know where and when. It's just a practicality. So let's look at this in the two ways that you could view it. So at 3:05, one of the members of the team haven't arrived. If it's a practicality, you're all thinking, I hope they're okay. Let's wait a little bit longer. Mm. Somebody go and see if they can find them. Try the mobile, yeah? But if it's a rule, at 3:01, you're thinking, they're late. They're always late. It's just like them to be late. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, it's not the person that creates that, it's the rule. And we do this with our children all the time. We say things like to our children, like, elbows off the table. Yeah. We create a rule, the child breaks it, because why wouldn't they? Because they're not doing anything wrong per se, other than breaking this arbitrary rule we've created for them. Right. And then, but because we've made a rule, we're forced. We have no choice but to have some punitive measure, and that might simply be the raised voice or the scowl that we give the child, or it could be they get sent to their room, or they miss out on a treat, or we label them as being naughty. Mm. Yeah, so there's I think these, maybe deeply philosophical, but I think they're worth thinking about, certainly.
Yeah. Well, it's just like what we were talking about. The rule itself is the presupposition. Like when you said earlier, how much blood was there in the scene versus did you see any blood? The rule itself presupposes that one is breaking such a rule, or so, you know what I mean, and
that it can be broken.
That it can be broken, and it's it's the old spirit of the law versus the letter of the law argument. Mm-hmm. And I think we should make a law that says we should always interpret the law as the spirit of the law and never the letter of the law. That'd be a good law,
and we should absolutely keep to that one.
Yeah.
You're listening to The Authenticity Show with your hosts Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Up next, Carlos and Satch continue their conversation with James Brown This time in an extended and unedited conversation about political correctness, ultra-sensitivity, and racism and sexism and all kinds of stuff. So, like I said, I thought it was so good that I didn't edit it at all. So here you go.
I've always enjoyed the kind of the fake mockery, the fake imperialism attitude. Yeah. It's just a bit of fun, of course. Yeah. But I've always enjoyed that kind of thing where, my business partner Danny's from Italy, and obviously any excuse to mock him for
being Italian.
He's
naturally.
Basically, he's a great friend, but if we get into a fight, he's just going to retreat immediately.
Of course.
So,
Right.
Go home to mama and eat some pasta.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. What did the Romans ever do for us? Kind of jokes. And I've always loved the kind of the thing with America, because everything, I presume it's like, well, it must be international. We all have the stereotypical thing that we associate with different nations around us.
Absolutely.
And we know it's not true, but we have that thing. And it's and unfortunately in today's society we confuse that with racism, and that's not the case.
Sure. Yeah.
So although it is interesting that you can be as offensive as you like to some countries, but not to others.
Yes. That's right.
Bizarre.
Let's get that clear.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? I can make as many jokes, like here in the UK, you can make as many jokes as you like about the French, the Germans, the Italians, the Swiss, the Portuguese, the Americans, no problems at all. We can even mock Mexicans. That's not really a big issue because it's too far away. Yeah. Nobody gives a shite. But if we were to make, if we were to mock the Chinese, as in the sort of stereotypical Ching Chong Chinaman kind of thing, man, if you were a comedian and you did that, you would be in as much trouble as Louis C.K. currently is for his latest jokes. Which, by the way, just on that one, just to offend a few people who are watching this, if you listen to that Louis C.K. thing and you were offended, you're an idiot.
I haven't
is
heard
what you are. But he basically, I mean, it's the whole point is, so this is a comedian at a comedy store doing a comedy set.
Yeah.
So number one, he's not sharing facts and personal opinions. He's telling jokes.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
That's really
context.
Huge context. Huge.
Yeah. And in essence, he makes. He's not specific about any particular school shooting, but he's talking about the idea that he starts off with the idea of kids these days are really dull. They take themselves way too seriously, which I agree with. I think kids do. They're not kids any longer, not in the proper sense. When we were at college and university, I don't know about you guys, but when I went to college and university, I partied hard, had a lot of fun, did a lot of really dumb things, and I don't regret any of them because they were huge life experiences to be part in. To have color in your past is a bloody good thing.
Yeah.
So he starts off with that premise, and then he moves on, and he says, basically, these days they're more likely to be speaking at a Senate hearing, and he makes some comment about, you can't be famous just because you survived a shooting by pushing a fat kid in the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was something along those lines, but you have to understand, you can't take what I'm saying because what I've just said isn't funny,
right?
Because I've not given it the flavor of a joke, of a story.
There's a whole bunch of context and pre-statements and...
Yeah. So what happens, of course, is somebody lifts out a line and and says, you're mocking people who survived a horrific thing. No, not really. But how's that different from any other faintly bad taste joke?
Right.
When... How long a period of time do we have to have before something officially moves into, we can joke about that now? Well, that's subjective.
Joke about the Great War.
Yeah, it's entirely
right.
subjective.
That's why a lot of comedians they'll make a joke, and if the audience goes ooh, they'll go, oh, too soon.
Yeah.
Because we understand there's this arbitrary amount of time that is supposed to go by that nobody knows what it is, and
but you also buy into something. So I think, so certainly here in the UK, the general rule of thumb from comedians, and I know a lot of the kind of the famous comedians here in the UK, not like personally, but I know a few of them quite well, and I know that the general rule of thumb is this: if you're invited into somebody else's home, i.e., you're on national television on a show where you're invited into somebody's home by nature, then you keep your comedy within a kind of a sensible parameters. You might kind of push at some edges here and there to get like the occasional ooh, but you stay away from obviously deeply offensive material.
Yeah.
But if somebody pays to come to your show, then all bets are off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about falls in line with the political correctness episode that I tagged you in on my page, actually. I'm not sure if you've heard any of it yet, or if you had time to listen to it.
I did listen to a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything we're talking about, it's sort of like I could see the two of them kind of. Oops, I just hit the mic. I could see the two of them sort of being played back to back because we're talking about a lot of the same stuff. People getting offended about things that maybe aren't appropriate. It's completely fine if you don't like a certain style of joking, but then that's your choice not to listen. It's another thing to police everyone else for enjoying it. Very different.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's absolutely sensible that you will have an opinion. It's sensible that you'll have your reasons for not liking certain things. I have something for personal reasons, which I don't need to mention at the moment, why I don't like to see people put their finger to their head and make the gesture of shooting. I, for a while, probably will not feel good about that when I see that. But I can't expect people to know that. I cannot expect to not do it. And I cannot think, I think it would be rude and preposterous of me to judge other people for doing that because somehow that makes them insensitive or something like that. No, I'm sensitive to that for my own reasons, but
yes, but you wouldn't call out the notion of you being triggered and that they've that you wouldn't the microaggression and it's the same as and there's nothing lighthearted about this at all. But a decade ago, my wife and I lost a child, and the pain of that doesn't go.
No.
It doesn't go at all. And I don't know, maybe 2 and a bit years afterwards, I'm still in a terribly bad place at the time. I was at a social event with a group of people, and some guy, bit drunk, very loudly started to make sort of dead baby jokes. Now, did it hurt? Terribly. Was I really upset? Absolutely. Did I get angry with him? No. Did I shout and scream about it? No. Why? Because he didn't know. He wasn't doing it maliciously. And here's the thing. Unless I'm willing to be a total hypocrite, I have to go, would I have made those jokes a few years earlier? Yeah, probably. Because without context, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Because that's the truth.
Yeah. Have I made this in my head? Yes, I have. Many times.
And I find that a lot of the I don't want to label people, but because it's a label that's kind of people are aware of, but some within this sort of social justice warrior style epithet are incredibly hypocritical.
Absolutely.
In fact, I think the more aggressive you are towards other people, the more hypocritical you become yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think what's important in a conversation like this one that we're having is this idea that everybody is not capable of being 100% sensitive to all of the needs of all of the people at all the time. It's impossible, and I love there's a Hindu concept that I've always tried to use as much as I can, which I think helps with this sort of topic. Is that it goes like this: you could either remove all the thorns and sharp pebbles of every road on the entire earth, or you could put on a pair of shoes. And there you go. People are going to say things. People are going to be offensive. People are going to, sometimes they mean it, and sometimes they don't mean it, and it's going to happen. But, put on a flippin' pair of shoes and just get past it,
Yeah.
Well, there's, I've been sort of following this whole discussion for the last few years because I'm genuinely interested in it, and I realize it's ground that you've trodden already. So, not spend too much more time on it, but kind of so certainly for the first year or two, I felt like this was just something happening in college campuses in the US. So I was kind of just watching it as a middle-aged man from a distance, kind of going, oh, this is interesting, a little bit scary, but harmless to a degree. But then I've watched it sort of seep into normality over the past sort of 5-10 years, where maybe these people moved out of university and went into corporate life, and these ideas have started to filter out further and further and further, and the total lack of evidence required to bring some of this stuff into being, I find astonishing. So now in the UK, most companies have some kind of unconscious bias training going on.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do they even know what the word means?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've listened to conversations with people. I've had conversations with people about this, and got into trying not to get into heated debates with people, because I realise there's a pointlessness sometimes about them. But I remember not long ago having this conversation with somebody who was saying, was going on about, basically it was somebody saying about how toxic masculinity and anti-feminism and all the usual, these are the buzzwords. And I said, look, I'm not discounting at any level that there's been an imbalance historically for lots of people, and that's the point, for lots of people, and that women weren't seen as equal to men for a lot of history, in a lot of parts of the world, not all, but in most, and that various races were discriminated against, and that racism still exists today, and that none of that's under dispute. But one thing is absolutely for certain, and that is we have never lived in a society more equal, more unracist, unsexist. Yeah, literally, it has never been as good as it is today in history. Yet we haven't complained about it as much in history as we do today either.
It's an interesting point.
That's really bizarre, and I often wonder. There was just kind of putting it out there for people to chew on as an idea. I think we could eliminate racism. Let's just stick with one. Let's go for racism. We could eliminate racism entirely in one generation. And that's all we'd need, one generation to eliminate racism. And the answer would be this, that when your child grows up, we never tell them about what happened, ever. We never mention it. We don't tell our children the history of the black people, the history of the white people, the history of oppression. We don't give them any of that reference at all, and we don't teach them racism by default either, by action. We literally have a new generation that comes up, and the word, we get rid of the word, we get rid of every association with it, and we simply don't let those children know, because what people don't seem to understand is that you bring and it doesn't matter. So if people are uncomfortable with terminology, because people, that's another thing I find bizarre, isn't it? So like 10 years ago, about 20 years ago, we decided that the politically correct term was that we could say coloured people. But then about 5-10 years ago, we decided that that was racist, but we can now use the phrase people of colour.
Right.
What is the difference between coloured people and people of colour?
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure somebody would give me some, like, oh, well, it's really important because da-da-da. I'm like, it's the word of. That's really all we've done here.
I have a question, because you put forward an interesting idea, but I have a counter question to you. How do you teach about history, period, without talking about that particular history? So in other words, you're suggesting to not, for a generation, just don't mention the bad stuff. But then do you go through and sort of filter out and cherry pick the bits of information? I mean, how do you tell where people...
So part of this is the point that it's not possible.
Okay, gotcha.
Is unfortunately part of it. It's unfortunately not possible. But what it does do is I think it raises this idea of how we tell the history. So I think we could still do the job correctly, but we'd have to be very cautious about how we frame the history. And one of the ways that has to be done is that you have to take out the ironic racism within the storytelling.
Sure.
If we told it about other people who have no connection to us people, then you're okay. But the moment you're telling the story in whites did this to blacks, and we continue today to refer to these people as the whites and those people as the blacks.
Yeah, I see the problem of association there. You can't not think those things, because it embeds the idea in it, which is why I put forward this really wild, crazy idea that's kind of along the same lines as what you are saying. And I know perhaps it's not practical, but here's my idea. Let's take, for example, the offense at the swastika. I've, for a long time, been a student of symbolism and occultism and things like that. It's an interest of mine. It's been an interest of mine since I was very young. And naturally, anyone who looks into the history of the swastika knows that it goes way, way back before the Germans.
They nicked it.
Absolutely nicked it. And it's really unfortunate that they used that symbol on the flag and it was a representation of some really evil things that happened and an evil regime and all that stuff. But the same could be said for the cross. Even more so over the course of a longer period of time. You know, the symbol of the cross has been used to harm people, unrightfully so, for millennia, right? Many generations of that. And yet we don't have that same opinion about the cross. And so what I was saying is that if, let's say, people who identify themselves as ethnically or religiously Jewish recognize that it is just a symbol and they can use that symbol too, and they were to take it on and differentiate the idea of a swastika from the Nazi flag, which had red, black, and white, but actually the swastika itself, and sort of reclaimed it for themselves, said, you know what, this is a symbol like any other symbol, and we can use it to represent our own thing.
Absolutely.
They would hijack. They would absolutely hijack any sense of offense and any satisfaction from a Nazi would be stolen from them, because it's a bit like if you said, you're a nerd, and I said, I am not a nerd. How dare you call me a nerd? I'm just interested in things. And I got really offended. That's one way. Or I could say, yeah, isn't that cool? I love being nerdy about stuff. I mean, how can you hurt me if I don't accept that the definition that you're using is offensive to me?
Yeah, exactly. So my point with things like the swastika or anything else like that is, it's a picture.
Yeah,
it's a little bit like when I meet somebody who is scared of a Ouija board.
right,
Like,
right.
It's like, I mean, it's a it's a piece of wood with some numbers on it
Exactly.
and some letters.
Exactly. I've had
You know,
people.
at what level?
Yeah,
You know,
well, hold on now. They do actually install the spirit into the board in the
Yeah.
factory. Yeah.
Well, what I do
Parker
like to
Brothers.
do under those circumstances is I like to give the original Victorian instructions to them from the Parker Brothers company
Right.
Uh-huh.
that explains the ideomotor response.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that it's a toy.
Yeah.
You moron.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
My favourite joke of all time,
Uh-huh.
I can tell you if your house is haunted.
How?
It isn't. Grow up.
Yeah. That's great. I love it.
That's
I love
cute.
it. Yeah.
But yeah. But it was this idea of sometimes we create a problem by creating a problem by giving it a name. There's a great. I'm a massive fan of Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books,
Always bring a towel.
and he says, "Sorry."
Always bring a towel.
Absolutely, and know where your towel is, you hoopy frood. That's a geeky reference for you all. But there's a point in that where he makes a comment about this civilization that solved their problem with depression because they realized the best way to not be depressed was to no longer have a word for it. Essentially,
Yeah.
To get rid of the connected word and symbolism of it. And there's actually a huge amount of truth to that. But the reverse applies, that we can create problems that weren't there. So recently I went to, I spoke at the United Kingdom Hypnosis Conference in London. And the room that we were in was this bizarre sort of Cold War bunker style. It was really bizarre.
I almost went this
like,
year, but I didn't manage.
It was great fun, but the room we were in, the lecture theatre, was very bizarre.
How offensive? Yeah.
It was just very odd. It was sort of I don't know how to explain it. Sort of all it was a theatre setup. But rather than just chairs and looking at the stage, you all had sort of these really high desks in front of you, like proper old school wooden desks, but with these little sort of black monitors inside with all the like 1960s, 70s equipment. Very odd, very odd. It looked like something out of a James Bond film, like an old,
Wow.
Dr. No kind of moment. But yeah, so we're there. Now, we'd been to lots of lectures in this theatre and listened to lots of great speakers, good and bad, and all points in between, as usual. And then one particular speaker got up and opened her talk by saying, the thing I really hate about these lecture theatres is because you all look down on me, you automatically think less of everything that I say.
Psychogeography.
Kind of. Yeah, psychogeography kind of thing. And I thought, well, I haven't been, but now I am.
Yeah.
You've just created a problem that literally wasn't there.
Yeah.
And, and it's things like that. There's a sense of, is it anything to do with the geography? There's this weird assumption, but I've sat in many lecture theatres where I've looked down at the professor, and you know what was the determining factor as to whether or not I rated the professor?
The knowledge of the professor.
The knowledge of the professor,
right?
Yes, and how well they imparted it to me. The geography of how I sat, looking at them, and what position we were in the elevation. Utterly irrelevant.
Yeah. See, I would prefer to give a lecture like that because everybody would look down at me and see how humble I am and how small.
Yeah.
Right.
And not big-headed at
I'm
all.
the ground of being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just bizarre nonsense stuff. But so I think so. The point of all of this is that if we're looking at these subjects, the labels and the spirit that we create around these ideas does have gravitas and power.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we've got to a point where we have the capacity to eradicate these big problems like racism, sexism, all of them, we could eradicate them. But the only way we can eradicate them is that we have to recognize that part of the problem is that we keep fecking talking about them in the way that we do.
Mm-hmm.
We keep pointing things out and labeling things as being racist and or homophobic or whatever else, and actually this doesn't solve the problem. And this notion that we have of the pendulum swing argument, that, you know, say for instance the sexism argument, you know, for so long the pendulum has swung so far towards men that the only way we can reach equality is by swinging the pendulum the other way first.
Nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not how you reach equality.
No,
you have to just aim for equality.
Yeah.
That's the only damn
balance
you
is
focus on
balance.
what you want. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, balance is balance.
Yeah.
Swinging it the other way, and the accusations. I mean, I got accused. I got accused like 2 months ago in some. Like literally no discussion had been had. I raised a point. I asked a question. Literally asked a question, and I got basically told about my white privilege that it was, you know, that the deeds of all bad white men rested on my shoulders as a white man.
Yeah.
Is it heavy?
Like,
Is it heavy? Yeah.
But,
How are you managing?
sorry.
How are you managing all that weight?
With all due respect, I'm not even responsible for what my dad did in his life. And I'm damn well not responsible for what my grandparents did. And I'm certainly not responsible. And actually, if you have any knowledge of mathematics, you know that, I mean, I've got more ancestors than there are people on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
If you work on the mathematical
makes sense
puzzle going out, yeah. So I've got more ancestors than there were people on this planet. So this idea that a race is responsible, or to pin it on my shoulders for something that I can do nothing about at all. Well, I mean, that's racist, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Isn't it? By definition, am I missing the point here?
Yeah.
I mean, my parents told me something which I thought was absolutely delightful and really beautiful. And then I met him and confirmed it. So this is going back 20 odd years now. So this is way before any of this stuff was politically being spoken about like this. But my mum said to me, she was going through some old school scrapbook stuff from when I was a little kid. And she said, do you remember your best friend at junior school? I went, oh yeah, Tyrone. She went, yeah. Do you remember him? I went, yeah. And she said, oh, describe him to me. And I did my best to describe Tyrone, just like who he was, how he acted, what he did, you know, just this, my best mate, you know. And she said, is that anything else you can remember? I said, no. And she showed me a picture. And I went, yeah, that's him. And she went, have you seen anything yet? I looked and I went, he's black.
Mm-hmm.
Had no idea. No idea at all. Because I was a child. And therefore, I didn't care.
Right.
Because you're not born racist or sexist or homophobic or any other thing.
Amen.
Yes. So you're taught this shite. Now, I was lucky that I wasn't taught this stuff. That's not who my parents were. So then to be labelled these things as an adult, I find massively offensive.
Yes.
How dare you say this to me? How dare you accuse me based on the colour of my skin and my gender? How dare you accuse me of these things?
You're reminding me, James, of about maybe 10, 15 years ago. There was this little boy, I think he might have been 4 or 5. I don't recall, but he was a little boy, cute little boy. We were in a store and the mother was waiting in the line, and this black gentleman was coming up to the line as well. And he was a real sweet boy. And the boy looks up at the man and quite innocently asks him, "Why are you black?" And the mother's face just completely crumpled. And she was you could just see that like her solar plexus was just imploding, and she's like, honey, we don't say that. And the man was extremely gracious. He smiled really big and he said, it's okay. And he wanted to address the boy, but she was so embarrassed she couldn't allow any further interaction, and she kind of picked him up and stuff like that. And he's like, it's completely fine. Like, he wasn't offended at all, because he could see that the kid was asking in such an innocent way, like, so, as though the kid just was curious, like why is your skin dark?
Yeah, why have you got an eye patch on? Why are you missing an arm?
I mean, there was nothing wrong with the question, and it was adorable.
No,
and it kind of really was.
But this is where we've gone absolutely nuts, to the point where it's now determined to be a grievance if you ask somebody where do you come from. Now, this is the weird thing. So I will ask anybody, like if I met either of you two socially, like somebody who looked like me, kind of thing, I would still say, oh, where are you from? Now, I'd live here in the UK, so if I say somebody, oh, where are you from? And they might say, oh, Poole, which is just down the road from me. Yeah, that's what I'm asking. That's literally what I'm asking. I'm asking you, where are you from? Here, there, somewhere else. That's it. Yeah. But what we now have, this weird situation is, if I had to ask somebody who had a different skin color to me, where are you from? Immediately the implication is, oh, are you suggesting that I'm not, I'm not supposed to be here? Are you telling me I have to go back to my own country? And actually, here's the weird thing. I don't believe that most people with a different skin color to me think that at all. I think most people think that I'm asking the question I'm actually asking. Yeah. It's a minority of people who are so overly sensitive about everything.
Yeah.
That
we'll buy him a pair of shoes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When I was a teenager, I went through the part of my developmental phase where I kind of fell into a social group, and my social group was I was one of the heavy metal kids as a kid. So I tried to grow my hair long, and I wore sort of dirty trench coats, and
Metallica shirts and cut off gloves, and
absolutely, and wrapped bands around all the way up my arm.
Naturally,
and that was kind of and that was the subculture group that I belonged to. Now, when we went out into the town as a group, strength in numbers, that was fine. When I went out on my own, I was in no way surprised when people looked at me and went, ugh. Yeah? Why would I be surprised? I stuck out like a sore thumb.
Right.
Because I was different. Now, equally, when I went to university, the place that I lived, which was a place called Portsmouth, this little suburb of Southampton, it was an almost entirely Asian community, Sikh community specifically. Sorry, Sikh community, and the pub that was next door to my digs, my halls. Do you call them digs?
Sometimes.
Yeah. The squalid hole that you live in as a student. Next to my digs was the pub. And I became a member of the pool team there. And this is not a joke. I was the only white guy in the pub.
Okay.
The only white guy. Everybody else was Sikh. Everybody else was Sikh. Even down to the bar staff. The whole place was a Sikh pub. But I don't know why. It was the pub next door. It's just why I first walked in, and nobody seemed to mind. So I stayed there and got on really well and joined the pool team. But I was the ethnic minority.
Right.
Yeah. And as such, day one, I kind of thought, oh, this is a bit intimidating, isn't it? Of course it is. Because it's different. But then you chat and you communicate and you find out that you've got more in common than you have that's different. And then within a short amount of time, you forget.
Yeah, right. Becomes the new normal. Yeah.
it just becomes fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes fine. But I can imagine why people struggle, but it's nobody's moving forward in a sensible way, and we've now reached this level of fragility where I don't know. I'm just a grumpy middle-aged man who's worried about the future.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing about right and left. If you go, you've got middle. You go right, and you reach. You eventually, when you go too far right, you eventually reach fascism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you go too far left, you eventually reach communism. I think the problem is it's a damn circle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think
totally.
I think the reality is that you go too far right or left, you end up here where everybody dies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you went left or whether you went right to get there.
Everybody
dies.
Everybody freezes at the North Pole. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody dies.
Totally.
It's just geometry.
Yeah. And I'm just a little bit concerned that we are. There's a great line from. In fact, I would actively say watch it. There's a monk debate under the title of what I call political correctness. So it's just political correctness.
Okay.
Look at monk debate, political correctness. And there are 4 speakers. There's Michael Eric Dyson, a woman that I don't know of, and she was actually very forgettable, unfortunately, in the debate. She didn't stand her ground in any sense. Jordan Peterson and Stephen Fry. Out of the 4, Stephen Fry, in my opinion, and maybe I'm slightly biased towards Stephen Fry because he's English and because I think he's really funny and he's really clever and articulate and wonderful and lovely and fluffy and gorgeous. Stephen Fry wins the debate because he's the only person who sticks to the point, who articulates himself really well, and who doesn't allow themselves to be dragged down. Michael Eric Dyson, I'm sorry, but I found him appalling, a really unpleasantly appalling individual. Only at the face of that debate. I'm not saying that that's how he would behave normally. I don't know him, but on the face of that debate, he comes across very badly. Peterson comes across like Peterson does, which, I think he's got some interesting points to be made. I think at the same time, the way he makes them, sometimes I think, oh, cool you, boo. But Fry comes out with some absolute gems, and one of the things that he says was that the liberals have become illiberal in their liberality.
Right.
Yeah, and they have become what's the word I'm looking for? Exclusive about their inclusivity, and that was the one I loved. They have become exclusive about their inclusivity.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what it made me think of is all they've done is they've said, here's your Venn diagram of normality, and we're people who are outside of your Venn diagram. So rather than expanding it to include those people, what they've done is they've just moved it across to exclude those over here. Yeah.
Those who are
and for those, yeah. And what's really frightening is that they've done it in such a way that for any of us who kind of feel like we fit the overlap of the Venn diagram, the people over on this side, and it's only the people on this far left side, see us as being on the right. So if you do anything other than to agree with them, you're the enemy.
Right.
As in, if you don't agree with them 100%, and that's the frustrating part, because I'm with them. I'm with them. I'm for. Do I want equality? Damn right. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot not to. You really would. It doesn't make any sense at all. Do I want to do away with minorities being oppressed? Yes, absolutely. Do I disagree with homophobia and transphobia and xenophobia? Well, yes, of course I do. Because again, why wouldn't you? Why would you want to think that way? But do I want to do it in the way that they're doing it? No. No.
Do you know who George Lakoff is?
The name, I've heard the name.
Yeah, he's a famous linguist. He wrote Metaphors We Live By.
Right. Yes.
And he also wrote something, a book called Don't Think of a Blue Elephant. And he's written several others, but that was the one I'm referring to right now. He talks about the right and the left and the failings of the left and the successes of the right and why that is, because he's part of, the left think tank. But what he quite honestly admits is that the left has really, missed this one important gem, which is that in all of their divisiveness, they've created divisiveness. They are not unified.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You get the people who are the environmentalists arguing against feminists who are arguing against, something else. And whereas the people on the folks on the right think tanks, they have much more money and much more power and influence most of the time because they don't exclude. So the people who are into family values, who are into anti-abortion, who are into eminent rights of domain for development of mineral rights, and et cetera, big business, so on. They're all in the same boat, and they sort of support one another. Mm-hmm. And so he talks about that in language and how that's done in language too. So he just basically offers it as a genuine strategic criticism, saying, hey, if you want change, you've got to change the way you use your language.
Yeah.
Stop being.
Well, here's the thing, which I think is fascinating about the monk debate, is that anybody who knows Stephen Fry's politics, your head was kind of fizzing at the start of this and the lead up to it, thinking, how is he on that side of the podium? How's he on the side of the podium with Jordan Peterson? Because we already know that he disagrees with Peterson on a lot of things, because he's a left liberal person, right. He's on the other side of. Surely he's on the other side. You have to watch the debate to hear his arguments, because he articulates himself so beautifully. But he says one of the points he makes is the success of the right is the catastrophic failure of the left.
Right.
Which is kind of in tow with what you're saying.
I mean, left.
That the reason that. Sorry?
I said right, I mean left.
Yeah. Well done there. Let's have a moment's silence for the death of that one. My favourite quote, which Fry uses, and it's been my absolute favourite quote of mine for many years, is a guy called Chesterton. And it's angels fly because they take themselves away.
Oh, yeah. I love that quote.
Yes,
I love that.
I like that guy.
Such a great quote.
Yeah,
such a great quote. And and I think that's kind of again what's missing in this whole debate. That there's no doubt, there's no uncertainty in what people are thinking. And although we haven't discussed it at all, and possibly won't have time to, but it's been my argument in the world of hypnosis that few people are willing to have doubt and uncertainty about what they believe. That this is what it is, this is how it works, and this is the way that people think, of course, and then cognitive bias, and et cetera. Confirmational biases, and actually it's incredibly healthy to
question
to encourage doubt and uncertainty, and to rejoice in being wrong. That's something else, and to take delight in being wrong, which I think is a really healthy thing. That when you find out that you were wrong about something, that's not a moment for it's a moment for yay, because I've just learned something. I've just grown. Something's happened.
Yeah. Wow.
It's beneficial.
There are a few people who I see doing that more, and it's been very, very inspiring to me, because I've that's opened my world a lot. You, James Tripp, Anthony Jacquin, Jürgen, who am I thinking? Rasmussen, excuse me, Jürgen Rasmussen, Scott Sandland.
I got very drunk with Jürgen a few months
ago.
You
did? I wanted to hear about that. Scott Sandland in the U.S., Michael Watson. These are people that I've seen have that attitude of curiosity, and I sort of work on emulating that in my own work and start to think about it. Wait, maybe it's not a bad thing if this doesn't work. I just get curious. What was it about it that didn't work, and why? And what if I backed up a little bit and looked at this completely differently? And what can I learn?
I think there's also something that I'm trying to think of where I heard this first, and so this is late in the evening for me, obviously, but there's this idea that as human beings we have this illusion of our own cause and effect, that we think that we are in control of our destiny, in the sense that if I do all the right things in the right order, the outcome is guaranteed somehow. Mm-hmm. And we lose the idea that essentially time and chance. We lose the idea of the third variable, the thing that we hadn't taken into consideration, the thing from left field, the act of God, whatever you want to call it, that we have no control over. And actually, I think it's a very healthy thing to realize that there are lots of things that we have no control over, and that we're back to the seeing is not believing, or shouldn't be, at least. Just because it's like, what's the Americanism? If it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's a duck. Yeah, and it's true if you're talking about a duck. but it's not. It's if you're using it as this metaphor for life, then no, sorry, that doesn't work, because one of the things I've learned as a magician is that my entire job is about making something look like it is, and sound like it is, and even feel like it is, but it really isn't. Yeah. That's the whole point.
Sometimes a cigar really is
to bend reality.
Yeah. I always like to say that. Perception is reality, but it might as well be.
Sorry,
but it's
sorry.
Not.
I'm still stuck. I'm still stuck on Carlos's comment. And my instant question is it hand rolled?
Oh my gosh! I see your point.
Yeah,
ooh, nice.
Sorry, I'll tuck it back in.
My goodness.
Oh goodness, that's good. That's good.
Yes, we're all 12. It's true.
Yeah,
12 years old.
This might be a great way to wrap it up on a high note. Like
a very low high note.
Yeah. Well, it's
yeah.
It was there. Before we do wrap it up, I actually have a question about your projects, because I know you're always doing something. What are you currently working on that's important to you, or something that's driving you right now in your work, whether it be hypnosis or magic, performance, any of that stuff?
Okay. Well, the truth is, there is two things, dear me. There are two things.
If there were, it was. And if there wasn't, it was.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. While I'm sat sitting. There are two things that are being worked on at the moment. Unfortunately, neither of them I can speak about. So, and those. No. Well, no, one of them I have actually. Yeah, one of them is NDA'd.
Oh wow.
Which kind of weirdly gives it probably doesn't give any clues at all. But one of them I can't talk about for that reason. The other one I can't talk about just simply because it's just not something that I'm yet willing to discuss until things come together. No, I mean it's you know, it's just it's life, isn't it? It's plodding on and having fun and doing what we do. You know, Danny and I still work together. Who's my business partner? Excuse me, in Power Academy. We are constantly refining and working on this much bigger, deeper subject of confidence, which is sort of where everything tends to come back to that subject for us at one level or another. We're currently at the beginning of looking at some more retreats that we've done in the past. We did one in Bali a few years ago. We did one in Florida.
These were focused on performance.
Yeah, well, we're sort of we're edging more into. So here's the thing: when we did the Bali retreat, first of all, we'd planned it to be a sort of classic come along for a few days in Bali and we'll teach you hypnosis, pickpocketing, and magic. And sort of performance-y stuff and fun. What we found really quickly was that it went so much deeper. It was much deeper, much more transformative for people. It turned into this sort of incredibly fun, but sort of deeply beneficial therapeutic thing, if you like. And we remodeled that again in Florida. So we're talking at the moment and realizing that it's probably going to be more aimed at lay people and much more about performing as human beings. And we're going to be using the magic, the pickpocketing, the hypnosis as kind of tools to play with these newfound skills, kind of thing. But it's kind of developmental. We're putting it together. Yeah, that's as much as I can really tell you at the moment. But it'll be a lot of fun. Okay. It'll be a lot of fun.
But from the standpoint of someone who isn't familiar with your work, I just kind of wanted to maybe say a few things about it, or I mean, it's essentially magic, pickpocketing, hypnosis, skills building.
Yeah, I mean, so if you imagine that I've spent the last, or between Danny and I, but so I've spent the last 20-something years performing as a magician, sleight of hand, but mostly based around the area of misdirection, of being able to fool the human brain with what it perceives, pickpocketing and hypnosis. And kind of a slightly unique take on hypnosis, I suppose, different to what most people think of. There's a lot of skills that underpin that stuff. There's a lot of skills involved there which are transferable out into other areas of life, whether that be confidence, understanding attention, how to manage attention, how to alter reality for other people, how to change perception, build rapport, lots and lots of stuff that goes into that. So what we really do is we teach people those skills. You know, we don't just teach you what to do, we teach you how to do it and why. And most people only teach you the what. We want to teach you the bit that makes it really work.
Right.
It's the attitude, the soft skills. Those are the things that make this stuff work. The rest of it, it's just window dressing. It's just paperwork. Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes. Without transformation, it's all just paperwork.
Very good.
So there has to be transformation. There has to be something much deeper that happens, that bubbles up. Particularly when we do our retreats, which are much more. They're much more expensive, of course, but they're much more intensive. What we want is for people, people to come from the old world, be transformed, and leave to a new world.
Wow, nice.
That's what we want.
That sounds exciting. Yeah,
wow.
It is. It's so much fun as well. It's not heavy. It's not burdensome. It's lots of Danny even does at least 3 of his sessions in the swimming pool.
Wow.
I think
great.
I saw a video of you guys doing backflips into the water and things like that on your little thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might find me on one of those retreats at some point in the near future.
Love to have you there. Love to have you there. I think the next one, we're in talks at the moment with Australia. So we're looking at Australia, Japan. We're going to do something in Europe as well soon, and hopefully come back to the States or Canada.
Great.
I mean, Canada seems slightly friendlier at the moment.
It's all under the auspices of the Queen, isn't it?
I have totally managed to avoid making any comments about Trump, although in fairness, all of the armor that we had a few years ago about making fun of America and Trump, etc., disappeared. We lost all of our collateral the moment we had Brexit.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
What were we thinking?
There are so many things that we could talk about, but we obviously need to end this particular episode now. But I'd love to have you on again and maybe talking a little bit about your ideas around psychology, hypnosis, different things like that. I think it would be fun to have you on sometime again.
Happy to chat.
Yeah.
More than happy to chat.
And
I hope this isn't too big an editing job, by the way. Because I know you've got to get this down to an hour, haven't you? So.
We'll leave it up to the maestro, Oliver. He'll handle it. Yeah. But you have a podcast of your own that you just started.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes, indeed. All right. I'll give a quick plug for this. So it's hypnoticimperceptions.com. So hypnoticimperceptions.com. It's also available on sort of iTunes and other podcast providers out there. If you're interested in the world of hypnosis, particularly if you're a therapist, then I would highly advise you come and listen. Basically, the podcast is to pick at some of the preconceived ideas and beliefs and notions in the world of hypnosis.
Sacred cows.
Sorry?
The sacred cows tipping. Sacred cow
yes,
tipping.
Yeah. I mean, we're tipping into a fire, burning, sautéing them off, cutting them up, and serving them on a plate with a nice sauce. Basically, we're barbecuing the bastards.
Brown sauce, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Milk them first. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. It's me and Nick Ebden, and it's very silly. I mean, we're being very childish a lot of the time, and there's lots of laughter and giggling. But I think there's some absolute gold in there as well, and it makes people think. We're hoping to have. We've had a few great guests on. We're hoping to have a few people come on in the new year. In this new year, who disagree with us. Because unfortunately, so far, everybody who's come on is kind of just been, they're in the same fold as we are, basically. And we're hoping to encourage a few folks who would like to champion their particular field. But so far, nobody's. I mean, I don't want to say that there's no that it's cowardice, but they probably just don't know about it. But I don't know. There are certain people that just won't come anywhere near us because they don't have an argument. Sorry, but they don't. So if you want to be challenged, if you want to have a few roasted sacred cows, we're killing the gods as much as we can. All of it is simply because we want people to start asking better questions. That's the real thing. That hypnosis deserves to be taken seriously. There is science behind hypnosis now. There's more science coming. There are people like Adam Eason who are actively involved in doing real research. And the days of hypnosis having to be this, at best, pseudoscience, at worst, just utter charlatan-led nonsense is over. And if we want our therapy to be taken seriously, if we want it to be brought into the medical profession, which would be a great place for it to be, and hugely beneficial, then we need to stop deceiving ourselves. And we need to stop treating hypnosis as if it's a collection of spells and rituals, as if it's, I think we're beyond magical stick waving now, aren't we?
I don't know.
Really?
I don't know if we are.
No, I don't think we are, unfortunately, but we could be. There's nothing wrong with a magical stick as long as you understand how it works.
Right.
And that's basically our point. You know, you tap away as much as you like, but just be honest about what's making it work, because it's not really the tapping or where you're tapping or meridians or other such things. There's better explanations, which are actually much more useful as well. Much more useful. Rituals are good; they have their place. Belief is great. I'm a massive believer in belief. But when we're talking about in-house, I'm not talking about the way we communicate with people, but when we talk about training, teaching other people, teaching people how it works, then we need to stop the lies. And if we don't think we're lying, we need to be better educated, because some of it's just not true.
Excellent point.
So, you know, my big thing I said at the conference last year was, I don't believe in trance, but I do believe in your belief in trance.
Right. That's great. Wow.
Reminding me.
That upset a few.
Yes, I'm sure. So how do people find out about you? Where would you direct them besides the podcast?
So obviously the podcast is hypnoticimperceptions.com. Our website for training stuff is Power Academy. That's POWA.academy. That's it, just power.academy.
No .com at the end.
No, it's .academy. That's it. So the company is Power Academy. The website is power.academy.
And I'm going to just reiterate this again for clarity's sake. It's not power, E-R. It's powa, P-O-W-A. Because when Americans hear a British accent, the A sounds like an R.
Yeah, well, yeah. I can solve that. Listen.
Okay, or you could pronounce.
The irony. The irony. Yeah. This is how things sound when they're pronounced properly.
Get your arms off the table.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So Power Academy, POWA.academy for the bits and pieces. And just Google James Brown Magician or James Brown Pickpocket or James Brown Hypnotist, and you can get hold of me in whatever way you like. I'm always open for conversations. If somebody disagrees with something I've said, come and talk to me, because here's the truth.
No, you're not.
I might be wrong.
No, you're not. Just kidding. Gosh, sorry for allowing us to keep you up so late. I know this was later for you than you intended, but it was really great talking to you again. Great philosophizing and chewing the fat, and I hope to do this again with you.
A great delight, and really good to see you again, and really good to meet you.
You too, likewise. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks, guys.
You've been listening to The Authenticity Show with your hosts, Carlos Casados and Satch Purcell. Very special thanks to our guest, James Brown. If you'd like to learn more about James, you can find his website at professional-opportunist.com, or you can also find his stuff at powa.academy. That's POWA.academy. This show is produced by Oliver Althoen, that's me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was composed by me. If you like this show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iTunes, Android Market, Stitcher Radio. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, you know what I mean. All the places. You can find our website at authenticityshow.com. Thanks for listening, and have an authentic day.